In the ashes of empire, a new map appeared. In December 1922, four republics signed a treaty in Moscow and created a federation unlike any great power before it, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. It promised equality of nations, power to workers' councils, and an end to exploitation. It also inherited famine, civil war scars, and a suspicion that the world beyond its borders wanted it gone. This is the Soviet Union's first quarter century, from revolution in 1917 to invasion in 1941. The names are familiar: Lenin, Trotsky, Stalin, Dzerzhinsky, Bukharin, Zinoviev, Kamenev, Tukhachevsky, Molotov, Kaganovich, Beria, Zhukov, but the choices were not inevitable. They were improvisations under pressure, victories paid for in human lives. In February 1917, the Romanov dynasty collapsed. By November 1917, Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov, Lenin, and the Bolshevik faction seized key points in Petrograd with military support from Leon Trotsky's Military Revolutionary Committee. The new government, the Council of People's Commissars, issued decrees on peace and land and placed the secret police, the Cheka, headed by Felix Dzerzhinsky, at the center of state security. To escape the World War, Brest-Litovsk was signed in March 1918, ceding swathes of territory to the Central Powers: Poland, the Baltics, Ukraine, parts of Belarus, and more. The price bought time, but not peace. Russia fractured into a civil war. The Reds, Bolsheviks, held industrial hubs and rail junctions. The Whites rallied around former imperial officers and regional elites. From the northwest, General Nikolai Yudenich lunged toward Petrograd. From the south, Anton Denikin and later Pyotr Wrangel drove on Moscow. In Siberia, Admiral Alexander Kolchak declared himself supreme ruler. Foreign troops landed: British, French, American, Canadian contingents at Murmansk, Archangel. Japanese forces deep in the Far East. Czechoslovak Legion fighters seized the Trans-Siberian Railway. Poland fought along its eastern frontier. The Reds survived by centralization and railways. Trotsky, as People's Commissar for Military Affairs, toured fronts in an armored train, sacking commanders, promoting talent, enforcing discipline. The state requisitioned grain under war communism. Resistance surged. The Tambov Rebellion, Antonov Movement, 1920-21, and the Kronstadt Mutiny, March 1921. Sailors who had once cheered the revolution demanded Soviets without communists. The regime crushed both. By late 1920-1922, white armies disintegrated. Wrangel evacuated Crimea. In 1921, amid famine on the Volga, Lenin retreated from war communism to the new economic policy, NEP, allowing small private trade and leasing of workshops, while heavy industry and banks remained state-run. On December 30th, 1922, delegates from the Russian SFSR, Ukrainian SSR, Belarusian SSR, and the Transcaucasian SFSR, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, proclaimed a union. The old empire contained over 100 ethnic groups. Bolshevik theory promised a federation where nations could flourish culturally while the economy was centrally planned. In the early 1920s, policy known as Korenizatsiya promoted local languages and cadres, Ukrainization, Belarusization, Georgian and Armenian schools, Kazakh and Uzbek alphabets standardized. But power still flowed toward Moscow. Joseph Jugashvili, Stalin, a Georgian by birth, argued for a tightly integrated union. Lenin, wary of Great Russian chauvinism, pushed for a looser federation. Their clash surfaced in the Georgian Affair, 1922, over how to integrate the Caucasus. Lenin, ailing, accused Stalin's allies of high-handedness. The structure remained federal in form, centralized in practice. Borders were drawn and would matter later. autonomous republics carved out in the Volga, North Caucasus, and Central Asia. The Transcaucasian SFSR would later split into 3 union republics. In 1924-1936, the map of Kazakh, Uzbek, Turkmen, Tajik, Kyrgyz republics took shape. Lenin suffered strokes in 1922-1923 and died on January 24, 1924. In the years just before, he warned about bureaucracy and quarreled with Stalin over nationalities, policy, and manners. His remarks circulated narrowly among top leaders. The succession was not a duel, but a series of coalitions. Grigory Zinoviev and Lev Kamenev aligned with Stalin against Trotsky. Later, Stalin joined with Nikolai Bukharin and moderates to defeat the united opposition of Trotsky, Zinoviev, Kamenev. By 1927, Trotsky was expelled from the party and exiled. By 1929, he was deported abroad. Behind the scenes, the secretariat mattered most. The general secretary controlled appointments, nomenclatura, meeting agendas, and the flow of documents. Stalin turned that administrative power into political dominance. Meanwhile, the NEP revived markets and cities. State trusts chased profitability. Village middlemen returned. Inequality widened. The question hung over everything: how fast to industrialize and who pays? In 1928, the state launched the first 5-year plan. Targets were breathtaking: coal, steel, electricity. Cities like Magnitogorsk rose around a blast furnace first, streets later. Engineers came from Germany, the USA, and elsewhere. Soviet students learned on the job. Propaganda minted heroes, record-breaking shock workers, while real wages lagged and housing strained to bursting. To fund machines and feed new workers, the countryside was pressed into collectivization. The campaign branded prosperous peasants kulaks and ordered dekulakization, confiscation, exile to the north and Siberia, and show trials. Individuals and whole families were uprooted. Collective farms, kolkhozy, and state farms, sovkhozy, replaced millions of household plots. Many villagers slaughtered livestock rather than surrender it. Quotas ignored seed and weather. Grain procurements intensified even as harvests faltered. 1932-1933 brought famine across multiple regions: Ukraine, the North Caucasus, the Volga, Kazakhstan, parts of Belarus and Russia. Death toll estimates vary by region and method, but the human loss was in the millions. In Kazakhstan, forced settlement and stock losses devastated nomadic life. In Ukraine, the catastrophe is commemorated as the Holodomor. Even as the countryside starved, flagship projects lit up. In 1932, Dnepro GES began generating power. Tractor plants rolled out machines by the thousands. The price was visible: queues, ration cards, and a countryside that would never be the same. After the assassination of Sergei Kirov in December 1934, repression rose. The state staged Moscow show trials in 1936-1938, where former leaders confessed, under pressure, to implausible conspiracies. Prosecutor Andrei Vyshinsky denounced them as mad dogs. Verdicts were death or long terms. The Red Army lost much of its senior command in 1937. Marshal Tukhachevsky and others were executed after closed trials. In the provinces, arrest quotas and national operations targeted groups by origin: Polish, German, Latvian minorities, on suspicion of fifth-column loyalties. The Gulag expanded into a penal empire. Prisoners quarried stone, felled timber, mined gold in Kolyma, dug the White Sea-Baltic Canal, Belomor Canal, built rail and settlements beyond the Arctic Circle. Mortality spiked with overwork, exposure, and malnutrition. By late 1938, the frenzy slowed. Yezhov himself was arrested. Beria took over the NKVD, easing mass operations but maintaining control. The party, state, and army emerged disciplined and deeply damaged. Pragmatism ran alongside ideology. In Rapallo, 1922, Berlin and Moscow normalized relations. Trade, credits, even quiet military cooperation in the 1920s. Over the decade, more capitals exchanged ambassadors. In 1934, the USSR joined the League of Nations. Abroad, the USSR urged popular fronts against fascism and backed the Spanish Republic with aircraft, tanks, and advisors, while extracting gold reserves for payment and tightening political control within the Republican camp. The war ended in 1939 with Franco's victory. Facing isolation and distrust, the Kremlin struck a stunning bargain. On August 23, 1939, Molotov and Ribbentrop signed a non-aggression pact with secret protocols, dividing spheres in Eastern Europe. In September 1939, Germany invaded Poland from the west. The USSR entered from the east. That winter, the USSR attacked Finland. The Winter War proved costly and exposed military weaknesses, though a revised peace in March 1940 ceded border territories to the Soviets. In 1940, the Baltic states were annexed. Bessarabia and northern Bukovina were taken from Romania. Buffer space grew. So did Europe's suspicion. At 03:15 on June 22, 1941, Operation Barbarossa tore open a front from the Baltic to the Black Sea. The Luftwaffe smashed airfields. Panzer groups knifed into rear areas. Whole armies were encircled. Within weeks, Minsk fell. Then the Smolensk battles raged. By September, Kiev became one of the largest encirclements in history. Warnings had come, British intercepts, border reports, and a Tokyo-based spy, Richard Sorge, who named the date. The leadership discounted them. When the invasion hit, the state formed the State Defense Committee, GDKO, and the wartime Stavka. Factories evacuated east to the Urals, Siberia, Kazakhstan. Machine tools loaded onto flat cars. Entire plants reassembled under open skies. The siege of Leningrad began in September 1941. Famine would grip the city. In October, the Moscow panic saw ministries burn files and civilians flee as panzers neared. Then the weather turned, and fresh Siberian divisions, redeployed as Japanese intentions clarified, helped stiffen the defense. Under Georgy Zhukov, a December counteroffensive shoved the Wehrmacht back from the capital's outskirts. The war would not be short. By year's end, the USSR had lost millions of soldiers, killed, captured, or wounded. Yet the state still stood, its industry rerouted, its armies learning hard lessons in modern war. A union forged in revolution, tempered by famine and fear, now faced an existential test. In the years ahead, it would mobilize beyond prediction, bury its dead, and push the invader back across a continent. But that is the next chapter. Here, in the winter of 1941, a battered state is still breathing and preparing to strike.